Good morning, everybody. Hi. So my name is Ruben, and as you'll get quickly from my accent, I'm a typical Londoner. Born and bred in Belgium. I actually built, alongside Sam, a company called Makers Academy in London that trains software engineers. We were the first coding bootcamp, and it's interesting that attracting diverse applicant is the #1 thing with lack of brand awareness from the poll. And I won't bore you with Makers, but Makers' exact thing is around diverse candidates. 35% women, over 60% from ethnic diversity. So a good place to get diverse candidates. And after having built Makers, I'm still on the board of the company. Sam and I left because we realized that there was an opportunity to train tech recruiters to learn about tech, which is how we met Amandeep. And when Amandeep and I chatted, and after he trained his team with TechMap, I realized that Amandeep had done some incredible stuff around tech recruitment at scale at an interesting company that's Automattic, which he's going to tell you a lot about. So which is why we wanted to organize this webinar so that we could extract, and that's what Amandeep and I did, extract all of the knowledge he had in the last 18 months going crazy on hiring in a very, very different and interesting way. And we thought it would be valuable to share with the world. So I'm excited to let Amandeep share his experience, his do's and don'ts, the mistakes, the ugly, the beautiful part of what he's done, etc. So before jumping on to that, I'm going to let Sam, my co-founder, introduce himself as well, because he has his own passion in education and he's a software engineer. So any technical question as well, he's the guy for you.
Hi, just wanted to say hi. Thanks everybody for attending this session. So my name's Sam, and as Ruben mentioned, I'm the other half of the co-founders of TechMap. My background's in software engineering, and as Ruben mentioned, we both built Makers together. Talk a little bit about sort of tech training and recruitment and why those things we think go together. At Makers in the mornings, sometimes we used to run these external sessions where we would have tech recruiters come and join us, and we'd train them in some aspect of technology. And these were crazy oversubscribed, despite being really, really early in the morning and then right in the centre of London. So people had to commute from all over the place to get there. And sort of realised that once they walked out the door and got back into their day jobs, these people were going to be trying to put into action a lot of kind of half-remembered stuff about tech, and this seemed like a really disempowering way to live your life. I know, being a technologist, how hard it is when you're working with other technologists and they're going 100 miles an hour on different technologies, or you're reading about 100 different technologies that have just come out in the last week, and we wanted to try and help people bridge that gap, because a little bit of technical understanding and some core central models of how technology works can unlock a whole lot more confidence across that field. So that's me, and that's my background. If you do have any technical questions around stuff today, be it what is React, all the way up to does this person seem like a good fit for this role, my DMs are always open, and I'll be around for the whole session. Thanks, Ruben.
Thanks, Sam. Over to you, Amandeep. Share with us everything that you've learned over the last 2 years.
Thank you. You're being too kind. I will be as honest as I can. I'm sometimes told I'm too transparent, but it is what it is. I'm just going to quickly share my screen, so hopefully this works. And I will go to, oh, lovely. As I go in, it needs to reload. Hopefully it'll work now, and I can go in present mode. Here we go. Perfect. So this should work now. Cool. Well, thank you all for joining. As Ruben mentioned, we met early this year, when it came to training our tech recruiters. And, this was really a big aspect of how or one of the aspects in terms of how we scaled our tech recruiting function. We have hired a lot of people this year, over the last 18 months, couple of years. But I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So very, very quickly, the aim of today, really want to kind of run through these main different areas. We're talking about achieving scale quickly. This isn't going to be, a perfect blueprint that everybody can copy, but hopefully you can pull some things out of here which can work for you. And there's a lot of iteration that needs to be done on this. This is not like the perfect thing. This is not the end game of where we need to be with this. But it will get you some results, is what I'm hoping. And some of this will hopefully be very relevant for most of you. But before I go into that, I'll just do a really quick introduction. I've been in recruitment since I graduated from university. I did economics at university, so not very technical, especially when I did economics. There was no R or Python or anything else that I had to do. It was very much pure recruiting, pure economics. Immediately after that, we were in the midst of financial crisis and everything else. So finance, my original route, was no longer open to me, and I ended up working for an agency, a recruitment agency, where I was doing tech. I was like, what is this? And it was my very first introduction to Microsoft Dynamics. I was like, what is this thing? SharePoint and stuff like this. But we did agency recruiting. I met my lovely wife. She was not happy with the extremely long hours and going out 5 times a week to go and entertain clients and candidates and in general good time. So I ended up moving in-house with my director's support, which was quite interesting. And then I've worked for a variety of different tech companies, big, small, international, local, on the consulting side, product side, you name it. It's kind of a whole range of different things there. And right now I'm with a company called Automattic. I'm currently a director of recruiting. The job was initially to come in and look after tech recruitment. However, that expanded pretty quickly. And I guess unofficially, I've been doing a bit more than that. And officially, as of Friday, I'll be looking after everything recruiting. So that's going to be quite interesting. The 3 biggest things about me, it's kind of one of those things which kids get told off for, it's the annoying thing. Why? Tell me why. I'm a little bit more subtle about it than that, but, I do like to ask why. I always want to know context behind why things are happening. I was once asked to go and hire 5 recruiters in a tiny little startup I was working for. It was 20 people. And I was like, why? First question I asked the founder, why? And eventually we figured out we didn't need 5 recruiters, and we hired 1 at the end of the year. I like to build pictures or storytelling, whichever way you want to kind of look at that. Hopefully you'll get a glimpse of that today. Whenever I'm telling things, I like to build a picture around that rather than just blurting out a whole load of numbers and facts and stuff like this. One of those things I think is super important for recruiters as well. And the last one is I'm very business orientated. I grew up around family business. It was just a big part of my life. And whenever I'm working for any company, I always like to try my best to understand as much about that business as possible. It's just a big part of who I am. And a quick bit about Automattic. It's an interesting company because I remember when I interviewed, I was like, why haven't I heard of Automattic before? Such a big company. Right now, I mean, when I interviewed, I think we were something like, I don't know, 1,200 people, 1,300 people, but we're now well over 2,000 people. I think we're at 2,200 or something, over 98 countries. And, we've got this range of products, which you can see at the bottom of this slide, which covers, these products can touch over 1 billion users every single month. They power some of the biggest websites in the world. I can't name all of them, but there are some big clients on being powered by WordPress VIP. The most interesting thing about us is, we have been doing what we call distributed working since day 1, right? So since 2005. This means we don't really, we've been doing remote work, if you want to call it, or the next iteration of remote work since before the pandemic, and since before everybody else started talking about it. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. We are definitely engineering focused. Roughly half the company or more is actually engineers. So that's quite an interesting culture dynamic within the company itself as well. And yes, we did actually, the talent function actually is only about 2.5 years old. So it's a relatively early function for the company, or for the age of the company. I joined in May last year, so just over 18 months ago. And we have managed to scale engineering hiring from hiring 50 engineers, in 18 months or so to hiring 500 plus. we've got the capability of doing that in 12 months now, but it's initially we had to do that. We had to scale it up. We've managed to maintain some pretty good numbers, very good offer acceptance rates, low attrition. We've got a 22-person recruiting function. That's not just in tech, that's across the board. However, we haven't got it all right. So when we hit scale, we didn't quite get gender diversity as good as we wanted it to be. We're at about 11%. I've been told that's okay, but it's not for us. I want that way, way, way higher than that. And we're doing a bunch of work to focus on that right now. And our time to hire, it's not quite as low as I wanted it to be. There's some reasons for that, but we're about 65 days for that right now. And very quickly, I'm going to talk about distributed work. So distributed work is different from remote work. Remote work typically relies around an office, or it relies around some core hours, or some kind of location specific. Distributed work is different to all of that. I found that out pretty quickly when I joined. We do not have core hours. There is no, in the employment contract that you get, you don't have, you're working from this time to this time. There is a certain number of hours you're supposed to work per week, of course, but it's up to you how you do that. We don't have office locations. We have 0 offices around the world for people to work from, that is. We have one acquired office in New York, which is used for events and stuff like that. But, it's not really, we're not an office-based company. People have got the flexibility to either use budget to build a home office. I've done that. I've got a lovely big desk and chair and 49-inch super ultra wide monitor and all that kind of funky fun stuff. Or you can use that budget towards going to a co-working space, a local co-working space. I know a bunch of people up in the Northwest were doing that. In the Northwest of the UK, we're doing that for a while, and then they stopped because they just weren't going in. Also, some people in Bulgaria were doing the same thing. But yeah, effectively, it's about trust in people. It's about looking at outcomes rather than, who's got bums on seats and stuff like that. I will kind of caveat this by saying there is a lot of writing. Asynchronous is our chosen method of communication, which is writing. We do a lot of Zoom calls. Oh, certainly I do a lot of Zoom calls, I should say. But we do a lot of writing as well. Everything is written. We use P2. It's an internal kind of blogging tool, if you want to call it that, to document everything that we do. So that is a very, very, very important part of what we do. And people have got whatever tools that they need. So if you want to ask me more about this, I'm happy to talk about it afterwards, either Q&A or even after this session. But I'll get into the meat of this. So a little bit of, I'm going to try and set the scene. When I joined Automattic, when I started talking to Automattic, my very first interview was on Slack. And when I say Slack, it wasn't an audio call on Slack. It was a text-based Slack interview over 90 minutes. And we went over. So I was sitting there in the evening on my laptop doing this interview on Slack. And I was like, cool, what's the next stage of the process? There was a Zoom call, thankfully, so I managed to get some more information. And then there was something called a trial. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about this as we go along, but for every single role at Automattic, people have to do a trial. This can be anything from 5 hours to 80 hours. And they used to be as long as 3 months back in the day. However, for engineering, they have been, well, they are at about the 40-hour mark for the trial. And that's after a 12-hour code test. So it's quite a lengthy process. But for the recruiting function, we had 2 tech recruiters and we had 1 specialist. Specialist is kind of like a coordinator, but they do a lot more. At least how we operate, they do quite a lot more than just what a coordinator does. And when I was trialing, I was kind of given this task, which is how would you scale up your tech recruiting function to hire 200, 250 people a year? And I was like, is this a real thing or is this hypothetical? And I was like, no, this is real. I was like, okay, cool. So hypothetically, if this all works out, I've got a 3-month notice period. This is my last job. I had a 3-month notice period. I'm going to finish this process. I'm going to join. I'm going to onboard. I'm going to hire some people. So we're talking about hiring 200, 250 people in about 6 months, minus whoever we've currently hired. And they were like, that's about right. I was like, okay. This becomes a completely different challenge to doing it over 12 months. And I said, the first things first, we're going to have to get a few different things right. And these are the different elements, the different chunks, which we'll be talking about through this presentation. First one I focused on was building the right team. I managed to negotiate my notice period down to 2 months. And in that, one of the first things I did in that notice period was look at how we were hiring tech recruiters. There was a 7-stage trial, which was phased, so that people would be asked to do a phase 1, and then they would be asked to do a phase 2, then a phase 3, and there were different chunks in each of those. And the first thing I did was cut that down to 1 phase with 2 parts. So we get on to building the right team. Before we get into the actual process of hiring recruiters, like I can talk about that. We've all been through interview processes. I don't have to teach people how to do this, that side of things. However, I needed to work out how many people we needed. And I looked at, okay, so we need 200, 250 people. I actually scaled that up and overestimated to 300 in 6 months. And basically reduced that, so divided that by the expected pass-through rate. So I looked at actual data at Automattic and looked at what is our pass-through rates right now from top of the funnel all the way through to us getting actual hires through the door. And then I went, well, is this what I would expect? And I had to, this took a lot of work because I actually had to kind of look at what is the current environment, what are the quirks and the traits, what can I change, what cannot be changed, and got through to this, like, what is my expected pass-through rate, as well as taking the time needed to get to that point. So whatever it is, month, 2 months. So I worked out we needed, I think it was 12 people in the tech recruiting team at that time. It's not quite the same right now, but yeah, it was roughly about 12 at that time. And I focused on hiring skilled tech recruiters, not all seniors. I wanted a good mixture, and I needed some specialists to support that team, because I didn't want recruiters, especially when we're scaling up this quickly, I didn't want recruiters to have to be spinning up trials. This is a whole process. They have to send out contracts, trial contracts. We have to maintain a whole bunch of stuff. There's spinning up. We have a tool that was in-house called Friendly Raccoon, which pulls things from Greenhouse. It spins up Slack channels and does all sorts of other things. But there's a lot of behind the scenes work which goes into the recruiting process. And I was like, we need specialists to help us with this. They can also own candidate experience. So the specialists at Automattic actually own all inbound candidates and all referrals, leaving recruiters to do sourcing work and all the other good stuff, like maintaining stakeholder relationships, working on process improvements, all the usual good recruiter work. So allowing them to kind of do all this extra stuff. And I wanted to make sure that recruiters were, it's kind of an Automattic culture thing. There's a big thing around the mindset of people that join Automattic, people who are still willing to roll their sleeves up, get their hands dirty, and kind of scale back and look at top level stuff and do all this kind of other stuff. So attitude over experience was a big thing for me. I could have easily gone out and said, I want to hire a whole bunch of senior recruiters, but I didn't. I had some seniors and I had some people who've got experience, but like not the most amount of experience. And they were what I would call mid-level, but with huge amounts of potential because of their attitude. They wanted to learn, they wanted to grow, and they're willing to kind of hustle, and is the kind of word that I like to use there. However, the first thing I did before starting to hire people, we were interviewing, but I needed to get people on board ASAP. So we actually worked with an external RPO, called Seed, and they were a company that was known to me, very, very good reviews and everything else. So I kind of trusted them to get up to speed really quickly, and they did. So they really, really helped get things running, from day one. Recruiters needed time to onboard. They had to go through support rotation, company onboarding, all this other stuff. Whereas, the external recruiters, the RPO, yes, they needed to learn about our culture and everything else. However, we could really supercharge the team really, really quickly. And we built out these little pods, so the team had support networks and all sorts of other things. Yeah. Then we needed to get the tools. So at Automattic, we use these tools up on the right. However, we've checked out these tools on the left. We've tried some of these tools which are on the bottom, and we've ditched them. because they just weren't working for us. They were slowing down the process. They weren't enabling the scale that we needed. They were just sucking up time. So we just stopped using them because we didn't need them. And so we have a relatively small stack in reality. Greenhouse is a good ATS. I think it's good for scale, for complexity. We're kind of locked into it for various reasons. We have a lot of technical wizardry done in the back end, which means we can't easily change at this stage. However, there is a really cool ATS called Ashby, who have just come out of the woodwork this year, or come into the public this year, I should say. And I think they're really cool. Whether they can achieve scale or not is a slight question mark I have, but they are amazing. We connect Looker into Greenhouse to do all sorts of advanced reporting. We're lucky enough to have a talent analytics team. It's a very small team, 1 or 2 people, but they can do a lot of analysis work for us. They can build really cool dashboards, prediction models, all sorts of other stuff like this. And then for scheduling, we use Calendly or Prelude. Ashby's got a really cool built-in tool for that as well. Because the Greenhouse tool doesn't work very well, we use Calendly and integrate it. We used to use Gem for nurturing candidates. However, we now use Greenhouse sourcing automation. Not perfect, no tool is, but it's built into Greenhouse, so you can do some cool reporting with it. Sourcing, we tried amazing hiring and all these things. Data is never accurate. So we ended up going back to using LinkedIn, X-ray searching, and we use a tool called Star Circle. I'm a little bit loath to kind of talk about that one because it's kind of like a secret weapon. It's kind of what I talk. It's kind of how I talk about it. They're an Irish company, amazing, work heavily in the US, but they've got a lot of US clients, is what I should say. But they kind of supercharge our sourcing efforts, and even our specialists can step in, work with Star Circle, rate the scoops, message candidates, put them in touch with our recruiters. It's it just supercharges things. It's like having a sourcing team without having to hire a sourcing team. And then for diversity, we kind of bake diversity into everything that we do. So we used to use Textio for like job ads, but it only really affects things for gender diversity. But there's a tool called Diversely, which we've been looking at very, very closely. Haven't actually got it yet. But that's really, really cool. It integrates into Greenhouse, can do a ton of different things. Referrals, I've put ... after Teamable just because I'm not sure how effective it really was. Or I should say the ROI on it is quite poor. And the main issue with referral tools right now is people have to connect their networks, and people don't like doing that. There's a privacy thing around it. So I'm not 100% sure if there's a tool that could really do things better than your recruiters can. Your recruiters can talk to people, talk to the people that you're hiring, talk to existing team members, go into their networks, and just source those referrals from people is kind of the main thing I would say on that front, and educate people so that people know what is out there. Sorry, I saw a question come in. I'm going to pause and just go to that. So the question is, when building your team and calculating how many recruiters you need to hire to deliver the forecast, what was your expectation on how many hires on average a recruiter should make per month? Divisive question. When I joined, I was basing it on like my experience and experience with teams that I've built in the UK. So I was kind of I was expecting initially for that to be somewhere around the 5 per month mark. However, we scaled that back. International team, I think there was only, out of all of the recruiters at Automattic, other than me, there was only 1 in the UK. Everybody else is international. We, from Argentina, all across Europe, we're talking Spain, Croatia, et cetera, all the way through to the Philippines and New Zealand. So we actually kind of look at this slightly differently based on hiring processes at Automattic as well. So we put this down to about, at the height of recruiting, we were looking at 2 sourced hires per recruiter per month at a minimum, as a minimum. For evergreen roles, we were looking higher than that, so between 4 to 5. For leadership roles, it was less, but on average, it was about 2 hires per month, 2 sourced hires per recruiter per month. And then the specialists were topping that up with any inbound and referral applications. That's that one. And the key things to remember when building a team, with your tech stack, is make sure there's accountability. Don't just put tools out there and leave them, like make sure they've got an owner, make sure they're being maintained and looked after, make sure everything integrates. There is a big thing happening, in my opinion, right now. This could be a little bit divisive, but there are too many tools. None of them talk to each other. There is, people have to log into different systems, and it's creating bloated recruiting stacks, which just aren't going to be used. Arguably, there's something happening, has been happening a long time in the tech world, but it hasn't really impacted it too much. But create that flow, create the integrations, create something which works. Use this tech stack yourself and figure this recruiting stack yourself and figure out, does the flow make sense? Where are candidates going? Do we have to import them, export them from different tools, or are we just, do they flow from one tool to the next easily? And the more you spend on your stack, the less you should be spending on agencies. When we managed to get to this 518 months, we had maybe 5 hires through an agency, and that was right at the beginning of it. We phased out agencies completely. We don't spend on any of them, and that includes these hiring community type agency type things like Hired and Vettery and Van Hack and stuff like this, where they charge you X% or they give you a SaaS model. Don't use any of those either. Kind of goes without saying, data and just test things, iterate, test. That's the main thing for me. Next thing, onboarding and calibration. So for me, this is how quickly your recruiters can get up to speed, or how quickly your team can get up to speed. So for us, we always give people, actually at Automattic, the average is between, it's about 6 months across Automattic for people to get up to speed and be onboarded. For recruiters, we've averaged 3 months. However, that's come down, that number has come down. I think the latest people we onboarded, they were productive in under a month. And it just comes to onboarding, properly onboarding people. It's not just about giving people a generic, run through this checklist, or run through this set of videos and do this training. It's about tailoring it to the individual. Get people shadowing. It was the main thing that really, for me, was the unlock button, if you want to call it. So I had people, I had recruiters shadowing recruiters and reverse shadowing as well. So not just shadowing one way, but doing it both ways. They were shadowing other team members in other teams, not just in our team. We had engineers shadow people so that, there wasn't just a recruiter perspective. They were actually getting real hands-on time with our engineers, and also the stakeholders. So, to make sure that there was a proper connection being built there. And don't just onboard team members. Fully onboard, any new interviews you're getting, any, new hiring managers, all this kind of stuff. They've got to be onboarded into the way that we recruit. So that is a super, super important journey for me as well. And on top of it all, we talked about this a little bit earlier, touched on it anyway, but culture is key. It's important. Get people embedded into your culture. If you can get people, the technical skills can be assessed in different parts of the process, but if you can calibrate for culture early on, what does good look like, et cetera, then, you're going to be winning half the battle at the top of the funnel. So for me, super, super important. And another one for me is train your recruiters. Don't neglect people. Everyone talks about training and development. They talk about engineers getting all of this budget to go to conferences and all this kind of good stuff. Amazing. Do it for us. Do it for your team. I've got a recruiting specialist who's got zero, well, when she joined anyway, she had zero recruiting experience when she joined, and zero tech experience. Had never worked with in tech. Was kind of a little bit of a technophobe, but was really looking forward to the challenge. At the other end of the spectrum, one of my senior recruiters had been a QA engineer in a previous life, but had about 10 years of recruiting experience on top. So, very experienced. But each and every one of them was still very passionate and very keen to learn. And I wanted to put them all on a level pegging. So, I sent them all through TechMap. This is kind of where the connection with TechMap comes in with Ruben. And they all went through the cohort at the same time as one group, really good for team building, team bonding. Their engagement levels went up with candidates, yes, but also with internal stakeholders. They could talk to people about co-test results, about trial results. They could talk to people about building new trials, like, oh, well, are we really testing, all of these proper technical skills? We were able to get a faster time to hire because of the engagement we're getting and because of the better calibration we're able to get through the entire funnel. And then there was a lower cost of hire because of all of this. There's a better experience. You're able to better engage with your talent, and ultimately better retention because we're hiring the most relevant people. You're not just putting random people through the process and hoping for the best. It made a ton of sense to kind of go through this side of things. And then building the hiring process. So the hiring process was an interesting one. At Automattic, we have, for engineers, we have this process. For any inbound applications, they go straight to a code test. 0 interviews, straight into a code test. They have a Slack channel, and it's all spun up, and they're connected to an engineer and all the rest of it. But code test, then they're into a trial. I talked about this before, 40-hour trial. There is no time limit on that. It can be done in a week. If somebody wants to dedicate it full time, we have no obligation to that. Some people have taken 6 months to do a trial. We don't like that. However, it can take that long. After that, they have a call to assign which team they're going to be joining. And then there is a HR chat. We don't handle offers. Our recruiters don't. All comp discussions, all comp is known by HR. Recruiters don't have access to any of that. So sometimes we have to do a comp review before the trial and all the rest of that kind of good stuff. It's a whole process. But ultimately, what I kind of looked at was, what are we doing with this? Like, do we need to improve this? I'd love to get it shorter. However, it works. So, how can we optimize the process? How can we reduce the number of candidates dropping out? How can we give them a better experience, ultimately, is what I'm looking at here. For outbound, we do still do a recruiter screen, but there is no interview after that. They go into a code test immediately after recruiter screen. We assess the motivation very early on. If somebody isn't going to be willing to do a 40-hour trial after a 12-hour code test, then we don't even put them into the process. We have to assess for that super, super early. We also don't really give people the super tailored pitch. We don't say, hey, you're going to be coming in and working on this specific team, working on this specific feature, working on this specific product in Automattic. We do that after the trial. And the reason for that is we want to get them into the process. We want to figure out where their strengths are. We want to figure out what do they enjoy, what do they not enjoy. Let them experience the culture of Automattic through the trial, the products, so they can figure out what they want to do. The people are in our Slack channels, they're in our water cooler channels, and all sorts of other things. So that's always there. And you can see some stuff on the right-hand side. I'll not go through it. Trials are paid. That's the main one. It's a nominal rate, $25 an hour. It's been like that since day one. Matt is our co-founder. Co-founded WordPress. And he started doing trials in day one, and they were always paid at $25 an hour. Still the same today, irrespective of role, irrespective of location around the world, it's $25 an hour. So that's an interesting thing. A unique thing about us is definitely the trial. Another one is that we have a dedicated team of engineers for engineering hiring. It's a rotation. And what I mean by rotation is these are engineers in the company who choose to spend a percentage of their time, some are full-time, some are part-time, dedicated to hiring engineers. So they are grading code tests, they are trial buddies for candidates coming through the process. They're working on, when they get time, very rarely they get time, but process optimization and process improvements. How can we make the trial better? How can we make the code test shorter? All this kind of good stuff. We have 2 full-time people in that team as well. They joined in the last year or so, 12 to 18 months. Amazing people. One person down in Uruguay, one person in the States, but working with somebody over here in Bulgaria. Absolutely phenomenal team. And I don't think a lot of what we're with this team in place, we've managed to achieve scale. Without this team, I don't think we would have been able to do it. So that's a really, really important part of, I would say, getting this. It's getting the engineering time and dedication that you need to be able to evaluate the talent that you bring in. This was a blocker for us at some point. We had to get more people into the process, train them up. And a big piece of the calibration between us and this team was about the pipelines. It's about being able to predict how many people coming into the pipeline so that we can get these people there and trained up in time. And quickly, this is kind of self-explanatory, but engaging with your talent, storytelling. It's telling people what really matters. Who cares about how much, like, engineers don't really care. They do in terms of they want to know about your company stability, but they don't care if you raised 100 million or a billion. Like, it is what it is. Find out what interests your talent, find out what interests your engineers. They want to know about interesting engineering challenges. Like, what is your engineering culture? What are the challenges which they're facing? What can they learn? How can they impact what you're doing? What's going to make them a better engineer once they've been at your company? That's what they really want to kind of know. And don't be the same as everyone else. Don't send cookie cutter messages. Personalize your stuff. Yes, I know there's a typo in that message. It's done on purpose. It's a recruiter thing. Hopefully you all got it. But yeah, talk to people. And the most important, another one, this is really important from an important aspect. One of the smaller aspects actually of TechMap is, who cares about the stack? Engineers are engineers. They can learn a new language very, very quickly. At Automattic, we are PHP on the back end and JavaScript on the front end. But we don't need PHP engineers. As long as engineers are open to working with PHP when they're here and they can learn it, we're fine with it. So I think one of our full-time hirers on the engineering side came into the business knowing Ruby from beforehand, didn't know PHP, but they're absolutely phenomenal. So that's a key thing there on focusing on the talent. It's really just kind of giving them the voice. And then quickly, just some of the really quick differentiators here, as a quick wrap up in a sense, make sure you stand out from the crowd. We at Automattic are fully distributed. We hire worldwide. We've managed to change the demographic of the company. We went from being something like 55% in the US to 40-something% now in the US, just in the last 18 months, from hiring so many people outside. And that's purely from sourcing. We do not have the greatest brand image outside of the US. We're not that well known outside the US, and we still managed to do it. And it's through branding. Yes, a little bit of branding. We don't spend a ton on employer brand, but it's largely through recruiting. It's through sourcing. It's through engaging and engaging the market and giving people that knowledge through talking to them. We've got a little secret weapon, which is WordPress, but we're not WordPress. We are WordPress.com. So we have to make that differentiator. It's about getting the right tools and processes. Don't over-engineer things. Don't get every single fancy thing in the marketplace. We tried it, didn't work. Stick with the basics, scale up slowly, one at a time. Look at the ROI, measure your ROI on the products which you're getting. Get your recruiters to talk engineers. They need to talk engineering talk. In my last job, I sat with the engineers, so I could talk. I knew what was going on. I knew the latest thing happening in a project. Couldn't necessarily talk about it, but I knew what was going on. I knew what was the next big thing. Which version of PHP are we working with? Which version of Symfony, the framework, are we working with? All this kind of stuff. Hiring process at work. Who cares if it's a 40-hour trial? As long as it works, that's the main thing. It's a long trial. Most people would like gasp at that and go, "Oh my God, it's so long." No, we've got better pass-through rates. We've got better retention. We have better offer acceptance rates and everything else. So the 40-hour trial works. Don't ditch something just because it doesn't work with the marketplace. Make the marketplace work for you, and get the candidates that are engaged with that. That's the main thing. Shadowing and onboarding, just literally talked about, and own your culture. Be you. Don't try and copy others. Don't try and be like, oh, Facebook do this. Let's do what Facebook do. Amazon have got this process. Let's ask these random questions. How many piano tuners are there in New York, or whatever it is? Do what you do. Own your culture. Hire for your culture. That's the main thing I would say on that front. And then I'll pass it back over to Ruben.
Great. Well, I'll make it extremely short, as I want to give time for people to answer questions. I think my video is not working. It is working now. So just very, very briefly, so Makers, apprenticeship training provider, a train, deploy, hire. If you're interested in diversity, as I said, I'm on the board, so not involved day to day, but drop me an email and I'll make the introduction to the CEO or to somebody else in the company if you're interested in hiring. That's for junior engineers, and I saw there was some questions here around juniors and experience. This is purely for junior backend, front-end DevOps tests. And as I said, very, very diverse focused. And if you want to really do diversity, you need to start from the bottom up. That's for sure. And then TechMap, which already Amandeep covered. As I said, it's a 15-hour course that is literally the only course on the market to train recruiters to speak tech, because Sam and I were a bit tired of not seeing a good course, or actually a course that actually trains tech recruiters to speak in the language that we would like them to speak to us. And at the end of the day, in-house recruiters are the forefront of the business. They're the first people that engineering candidates speak to. So we always thought that if they could just learn tech in 15 hours, then that would probably do good.